Princess stood alone in her preparation chamber, watching her reflection shimmer in the mirror. Her crystalline skin changed colors with her emotions, currently shifting between deep purple and nervous silver. Today was supposed to be the most important day of her life, yet she felt like a prisoner walking to her sentence. The space station hummed around her, a massive structure floating between two worlds. On one side was the Empire, her home, spanning 40 star systems of pure energy and light. On the other side was Earth and its human colonies, primitive beings who had only been traveling through space for 200 years. And here she was, about to marry one of them to seal a peace treaty. Her attendant floated nearby in her energy form. "The ceremony begins in 1 hour, Princess. The diplomatic guests are already arriving." Nodded but said nothing. What could she say? That she was terrified. That she had spent the last 3 months trying to find a way out of this arrangement. That every elder in the High Council had told her humans were dangerous, violent, and barely more than animals. Down in the war room on the human side of the station, Admiral paced back and forth. Her boots made sharp sounds against the metal floor. Around the table sat her top officers, all of them looking uncomfortable. "This is a mistake," she said for the 10th time that morning. "We're giving them access to our most decorated officer. What if this is just a trick?" Commander sat quietly in the corner, reading something on his data pad. He had been the one to volunteer for this mission when everyone else refused. No one understood why. He was their best tactical officer, a hero from the border conflicts. He could have any assignment he wanted. Instead, he chose to marry an alien princess. "Sir," one of the younger officers spoke up, "are you sure about this?" Looked up and smiled calmly, "I'm sure." "But why? You don't even know her." Returned to his reading without answering. On his screen was a poetry book, written in script so complex that only a handful of humans could read it. He had been studying culture for a full year, learning everything he could about their history, their customs, their way of thinking. Admiral sat down heavily. "I just hope you know what you're doing. A lot is riding on this." "I know," he said quietly. "That's exactly why I volunteered." Back in the council chambers, Elder was making a final attempt to stop the wedding. His energy form blazed with anger as he addressed the assembled leaders. "This union is against everything we stand for," he declared. "Humans are primitive warmongers. They think with emotions instead of logic. They destroy their own planet and then spread into space like a disease. And now we're going to let one of them marry our princess. This is madness." Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Some agreed with him, but the peace treaty was already signed. The marriage was the final seal on decades of negotiation. "The decision is made," the High Chancellor said firmly. "Princess has accepted her duty to the Empire. The ceremony will proceed." Elder's form turned a dark, angry red. "Then I will be there to witness this mistake, and when it fails, as it surely will, I will be the first to demand its end." The Grand Hall of Convergence was the largest room on the station, designed to host events between different species. The gravity could be adjusted, the atmosphere could be modified, and there was enough space for thousands of guests. Today, it was filled with representatives from both civilizations, all of them watching each other with suspicion. On one side sat their energy forms creating a beautiful display of shifting lights. On the other side sat the humans in their formal clothes, looking stiff and uncomfortable. Between them was an altar designed by both cultures, a symbol of the union they were attempting. Waited in the preparation area behind the hall. Her attendants had dressed her in traditional royal colors, and her form now cycled through purple, gold, and silver in perfect rhythm. She looked every bit the princess she was supposed to be. But inside, her energy core felt unstable with fear. "It's time," said softly. Moved toward the entrance. The massive doors opened, and music from both worlds began to play. It was supposed to be harmonious, but to his ears, the human instrument sounded strange and foreign mixed with resonance. She began the long walk down the aisle. Every eye was on her. The guests remained perfectly still, their forms neutral and controlled. The humans shifted and whispered, clearly fascinated by her appearance. She had been told that humans found her people beautiful, but also strange and unsettling. Kept her eyes forward, moving steadily toward the altar. She could see a figure waiting there, but the distance and the lights made it hard to see details. That would be him, the human she was going to marry, commander of Earth's diplomatic fleet, a soldier, a man who had killed warriors during the border conflicts. As she got closer, she began to make out more details. He was tall for a human, wearing formal clothing that looked restrictive and uncomfortable. His dark hair was neat, his posture military straight. Just another human soldier, she told herself. Just another primitive being who thought with his heart instead of his head. Then she was close enough to see his face clearly, and everything changed. Stood at the altar wearing traditional human formal wear, but he had added something unexpected. Across his chest was a sash made of energy-reactive threads, the kind only used. It glowed softly in response to her presence. And there, carefully arranged on the human side of the altar, were flowers. They only grew on Prime, her home world. They were incredibly rare and were traditionally offered to show the deepest respect. But that wasn't what stopped her. It was his eyes. Humans, she had been told, could barely see beyond the visible light spectrum. Their eyes were limited, primitive, weak. But when his eyes met hers, she felt something she had never experienced before. He wasn't looking at a princess. He wasn't looking at a political tool or an alien curiosity. He was looking at her, at the person she was underneath all the titles and duties. Humans called it seeing someone's soul. She had always thought it was just a metaphor, a poetic way of describing recognition. She had been wrong. Stopped walking. Her form froze mid-step, locked in place. She couldn't move. She couldn't think. All she could do was stare at this human who somehow, impossibly, saw her in a way no one ever had before. The hall erupted into chaos around her, but she barely heard it. All she could see were his eyes, and all she could feel was the terrible, wonderful realization that everything she thought she knew about humans was about to change. The moment stopped moving. Panic spread through the grand hall like wildfire. Her crystalline form remained frozen in place, halfway down the aisle, locked in mid-step. Her colors stopped shifting, fixed in a pattern of silver and gold that made her look like a statue made of light. Medical emergency, someone shouted from the side. Rushed forward, her energy form flickering with worry. Other physicians followed, surrounding their princess with scanning equipment that hummed and beeped. On the human side, Admiral's hand moved to her weapon, her eyes scanning the crowd for threats. Elder rose from his seat, his form blazing with triumph. You see, the ancients themselves reject this union. This is a sign that we should never have agreed to this marriage. The princess's own body refuses to proceed. Arguments broke out across the hall. Council members shouted at each other in their musical language. Human diplomats demanded explanations. Security forces from both sides moved toward the aisle, creating a tense standoff around the frozen princess. Stood at the altar, watching everything unfold with calm eyes. While everyone else panicked, he remained perfectly still, studying his frozen form. He saw something the others didn't. Her energy patterns weren't erratic or unstable like someone having a medical crisis. They were simply paused, like someone who had stopped to think. He made a decision. Walking slowly down the aisle, moved past the physicians and security guards. Several people tried to stop him, but he gently moved around them without breaking stride. His movements were careful and deliberate, non-threatening. He approached until he stood just a few feet away. Commander, step back, one of the physicians warned. We don't know what's happening. Your presence might be making it worse. Ignored the warning. He looked its frozen form, at the colors locked in her crystalline skin, at the way her energy seemed to pulse in a steady rhythm. Not chaos, not crisis, just pause. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the hall. He extended his hand, palm up, in a gesture of offering. Not demanding, not grabbing, just offering. And when he spoke, it wasn't in English or the common trade language. He spoke in pure, perfect, his accent flawless. Daughter of starlight, you don't have to move until you're ready. I will wait for you. I will always wait for you. The words came from an ancient poem, one that most modern had never even read. It was from a collection called Songs of the Eternal Twilight, written thousands of years ago. The passage he quoted was about choice, about the importance of moving forward only when one's own energy was aligned with purpose. A gasp went through the witnesses. Even Elder fell silent, shocked that a human could speak their language so perfectly, much less quote their most sacred poetry. But heard something more in those words. She heard kindness. She heard patience. She heard respect. In culture, telling someone to take their time, to move only when ready, was one of the deepest forms of love someone could express. It meant valuing their autonomy more than your own desires. Her form flickered, colors beginning to shift again. The paralysis that had gripped her started to fade, not because someone commanded it, but because she chose to release it. Energy flowed back into her limbs, and she took a breath of pure radiation that served as air for her kind. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and placed her hand over. The touch should have been impossible. Human flesh and energy didn't mix well, but had prepared for this moment. His hand was wrapped in a thin layer of energy-reactive material, specially designed to allow safe contact between their species. It had taken engineers months to develop. When their hands met, felt a warmth she had never experienced before. Not heat, but something else. Connection, understanding, the promise that she wasn't alone in this. "I'm ready," she whispered in. "Then let's walk together," replied in the same language. Side by side, they moved to the altar. The hall remained silent, everyone too shocked to speak. This wasn't how the ceremony was supposed to go, but somehow it felt more real than any carefully planned ritual could have been. The officiant, a neutral diplomat from a third species, cleared his throat and began the ceremony. The words were formal and traditional, speaking about unity between peoples, about peace between civilizations, about the bonds that would tie their futures together. But barely heard the official words. She was too focused on the man standing beside her, kept his hand extended, still offering, still waiting for her to take it or not as she chose. Even now, he gave her the choice. She studied his face more carefully. He wasn't classically handsome by standards, being solid matter instead of flowing energy. But there was something in his expression that drew her. His eyes held depth and intelligence. His mouth curved slightly with what humans called a smile, but it didn't look like mockery or cruelty. It looked like genuine warmth. And those eyes, those impossible, primitive human eyes that somehow saw her completely. "Do you, Princess of the Empire, take this human as your bonded partner, to unite your peoples in peace and your lives in partnership?" the officiant asked. Had practiced her response 100 times. A simple "I do" in the common language, formal and diplomatic. But standing here, with his hand still offered and his eyes still seeing her truly, she found herself saying something different. "I choose this," she said the words carrying the weight of personal decision rather than duty. "I choose him." A murmur went through the witnesses. Her phrasing was significant. In their culture, there was a difference between accepting something and choosing it. Acceptance was passive, done from duty. Choice was active, done from will. By saying, "I choose," she was declaring this marriage as her own decision, not just an obligation to the empire. Smile deepened and she realized he understood the significance. Of course he did. He had studied her culture for a year. He knew exactly what her words meant. "And do you, commander of Earth's diplomatic fleet, Take this as your bonded partner, to unite your peoples in peace and your lives in partnership." The officiant continued. Didn't hesitate. Looking directly at, he spoke in again. "From the moment I first saw you, I chose you. Every day since, I have chosen you again. And every day for the rest of my life, I will continue to choose you." His words weren't part of any script. They weren't diplomatic or formal. They were personal and real, and they hit like a solar flare. He had seen her before. When? How? But there was no time to ask. The officiant was concluding the ceremony, declaring them bonded before both their peoples. Music played again, louder this time, as if trying to convince everyone that this was a celebration. As tradition required, and turned to face the assembled guests. They were supposed to walk back down the aisle separately, maintaining diplomatic distance. Instead, kept his hand extended and kept hers touching his through the protective barrier. They walked together, and the hall erupted into mixed reactions. Some cheered, some remained silent, and some, like Elder, looked like they wanted to stop this immediately. But it was done. They were married. The treaty was sealed, and found herself looking at the human beside her with entirely new eyes. Whatever she had expected from this arranged marriage, it wasn't this. It wasn't a man who spoke her language fluently. It wasn't flowers from her home world. It wasn't poetry that touched her soul. And it definitely wasn't someone who looked at her like she was precious beyond measure. As they reached the exit of the grand hall, leaned slightly closer and whispered in, "There is much I need to tell you. When we're alone, I'll explain everything." His colors shifted to curious blue mixed with excited gold. For the first time since learning about this arranged marriage, she found herself actually wanting to be alone with her new husband. She had no idea that in just a few short months, people would try to kill them both for this union. All she knew was that something impossible had just happened. She had fallen for a human. 3 months had passed since the wedding, and had discovered that marriage to a human was nothing like she expected. Their shared quarters were a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate both their biological needs. Half the space maintained Earth-standard atmosphere and gravity, while the other half contained pure energy fields where could exist comfortably. Between them was a neutral zone where they could interact safely. Tonight was teaching her about human food. He stood in the kitchen area, carefully preparing something he called bibimbap while explaining each ingredient. Watched from the neutral zone, fascinated by the process. "Humans spend so much time on food," she observed, her colors shifting to curious yellow. "My people just absorb stellar radiation. It takes seconds." Smiled as he stirred vegetables in a hot pan. "Food is more than fuel for us. It's culture, art, love. My mother taught me this recipe. Every time I make it, I remember her." "Memory tied to action," said thoughtfully. "That's very human." "Is that a compliment or an observation?" he asked, glancing at her with those eyes that still made her energy core flutter. "Both," she admitted. Over the past 3 months, they had spent every free moment learning about each other. Taught her about human customs, emotions, and the concept of physical touch. Introduced him to meditation, showing him how to perceive reality in layers of energy and probability. They talked for hours about philosophy, science, art, and their very different experiences of existence. But outside their private quarters, the opposition to their marriage was growing stronger, not weaker. Elder had gathered a faction of conservatives who refused to recognize the union. They spread rumors that had been brainwashed by human pheromones, that she was betraying her people, that the marriage was a human trick to steal technology. On the human side, General led a group of military who believed they were using to infiltrate human space. They wanted recalled immediately, and the princess detained for security screening. Neither nor knew that these two opposition groups had begun secretly communicating with each other. Despite their different reasons, they shared a common goal: end the marriage by force if necessary. The attack came during a cultural exchange event at the station's main conference center. Was giving a speech about human cooperation to an audience of diplomats and students from both species. Sat in the front row, her form glowing with pride as she listened to her husband speak passionately about building bridges between their peoples. "We are more alike than we are different," was saying. "Both our species value knowledge, beauty, and the well-being of our children. Both of us look at the stars and wonder what's out there. Both of us create art and poetry to express what mere words cannot. These similarities matter more than our biological differences." The lights went out suddenly, plunging the room into complete darkness. Emergency systems should have activated immediately, but they didn't. Someone had sabotaged the station's power grid. In the darkness, heard the distinct sound of human weapons charging. Her energy-based vision allowed her to see what others couldn't. 4 figures in stealth suits moving through the crowd toward. They were human soldiers, but they weren't station security. These were the mercenaries General had hired. She called out in warning. The soldiers moved fast, grabbing before he could react. One of them spoke in a harsh whisper. "Commander, we're extracting you for your safety. Don't resist." "I don't need extraction," said firmly, trying to pull away. "I'm exactly where I want to be." "You've been compromised by the alien," another soldier growled. "General's orders, you're coming with us." That's when they made their first mistake. One of the soldiers pointed his weapon at, "Stay back, energy being, or we'll disrupt your form." They thought she was helpless. They thought we're weak, peaceful scholars who had forgotten how to fight. They were wrong. His form blazed with sudden, brilliant light. The room filled with electromagnetic energy as she stood to her full height. In that moment, she wasn't just a princess. She was a descendant of the warrior queens, beings who had conquered 40 star systems before choosing the path of peace. "You will not touch him," she said, her voice resonating with power that made the walls vibrate. "You will not harm him. He is mine and I am his." The soldiers fired their weapons. Energy disruptors designed to scatter forms, technology that should have torn her apart. But was royal blood, trained since childhood in abilities most never developed. She raised her hand and the disruptor beams bent around her, redirected harmlessly into the walls. Then she struck back. With precision that came from years of training she had never told about, manipulated the electromagnetic fields around each weapon. The guns sparked and died in the soldiers' hands, completely disabled without harming anyone. She could have killed them easily. She could have stopped their hearts or fried their nervous systems with a thought. But that wasn't the way anymore. "I said you will not touch him," she repeated, moving to stand between and the soldiers. Her form burned so bright that the humans had to look away, their eyes unable to handle the intensity. But the attack wasn't over. From the other side of the room, a saboteur revealed himself. His name was a young radical who followed Elder. His form glowed red with anger as he disrupted the energy fields that kept the room's atmosphere stable. "Traitor," he shouted at, "you've abandoned your people for a primitive. You're a disgrace to the Empire." The atmospheric failure meant all the humans in the room were suddenly struggling to breathe. Gasped, falling to his knees. Others collapsed around the room. In minutes, they would all suffocate. Faced an impossible choice. She could stop, but that would take all her concentration. She couldn't maintain the atmospheric field and fight him at the same time. Either she saved and the other humans, or she stopped the saboteur. Then did something that reminded her why she loved him. Still gasping for air, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. His hands shook as he activated it, and suddenly a portable atmospheric field generator hummed to life. It was human technology, crude by standards, but effective. The humans in the room could breathe again. Go wheezed, looking up at, "Stop him, I've got this." Didn't hesitate. She flew at, her form moving faster than the human eye could track. The two clashed in a display of energy that lit up the entire room like a miniature star. They fought in ways humans couldn't understand, manipulating electromagnetic fields and probability waves, existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Was young and angry, but had been trained by the best teachers in the Empire. Within seconds, she had him subdued, his energy form bound by fields he couldn't break. Station security finally arrived, weapons drawn, shouting orders in multiple languages. They found a scene of chaos. 4 human soldiers with disabled weapons, 1 captured saboteur, and Princess standing protectively over her husband, her form still blazing with power. Admiral pushed through the security forces, her face pale with shock. She looked at the mercenaries on the floor, then at struggling to breathe even with the portable generator. "What happened here?" she demanded. Managed to stand, still weak but recovering. He pointed at the 4 soldiers. "Those men tried to kidnap me on General's orders. They were going to forcibly separate me from my wife." Then spoke, her voice carrying authority that made even the Admiral pause. "And that," she gestured to, "tried to kill everyone in this room because he disapproves of my marriage. The opposition has turned violent, Admiral, on both sides." The truth hit everyone in the room like a shockwave. The extremists from both species had coordinated an attack. They had put aside their hatred of each other long enough to try to destroy the one thing that united their peoples, the marriage between and. Admiral's expression hardened. "This ends now. I want General arrested immediately. These men will face military trial. And I will personally see that Elder and his faction face justice," added. "They have violated every principle the Empire stands for." As security led the attackers away and stood together in the damaged conference room, his breathing was still labored and her form flickered with exhaustion from the fight. But they were alive, and they were together. "Are you all right?" asked, reaching out to touch the energy field that surrounded her. "Am I all right?" Colors shifted to incredulous purple. "You nearly suffocated and you're asking if I'm all right. You're the one who just fought off attackers from both our species," he pointed out with a weak smile. Moved closer, letting her energy field interact gently with his protective barrier. "I told you, you're mine and I'm yours. I will protect what's mine." Smile widened despite his exhaustion. "I love you too." Those 3 words, said so simply in the middle of chaos, made his entire form glow with happiness. 3 months ago, she had frozen on their wedding day because she was scared. Now she knew exactly what she was fighting for. This marriage, this impossible union between such different beings, was worth defending. And anyone who tried to tear them apart would learn just how fierce a princess could be when protecting the one she loved. The tribunal chamber was the largest courtroom on the station, designed to handle disputes between different species. Today it was packed with representatives from both the Empire and Earth's coalition, along with neutral observers from a dozen other civilizations. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. The assassination attempt had forced both governments to take action. General was under arrest, along with his mercenaries. Elder and the saboteur faced charges in court. But the real question remained: was the marriage between and legitimate, or was it a political arrangement that had been forced on both of them? The tribunal would decide. 3 judges sat at the high bench, 1 human, and 1 from the neutral species who served as chief arbiter. The judge, an ancient being named Arbitrator Thane, called the court to order. "This tribunal has been convened to examine the nature of the union between Princess of and Commander of Earth," Thane announced in his deep, rumbling voice. "Both parties will testify. We will determine if this marriage is genuine or if it was coerced for political purposes." Sat in the designated area for witnesses, her form subdued and nervous. Sat across from her in the human section, looking calm but tired. They weren't allowed to sit together during the proceedings. The separation felt wrong after 3 months of hardly being apart. The prosecutor went first. She was a stern council member named Counselor who had always opposed the marriage. Her form glowed with official authority as she addressed the court. "Princess, you were ordered to marry this human for political reasons, correct?" asked. "I was asked to consider it," replied carefully. "I agreed." "But did you have a real choice? Your royalty. Refusing would have meant abandoning your duty to the empire." Colors shifted to defensive orange. "Every choice we make has consequences. That doesn't mean we don't choose." Pressed harder. "Before the wedding, you tried to find ways out of the arrangement. You consulted with legal experts about potential loopholes. Is that not true?" The courtroom murmured, felt exposed, ashamed. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "I was scared. I didn't know him." "And now, are you still scared?" Looked across the room at. He met her eyes and smiled gently, encouragingly. In that moment, she felt the fear she had carried for months finally dissolve completely. "No," she said firmly. "Now I'm terrified of losing him." The prosecutor moved on to questioning. A human lawyer named Attorney, who worked for the Military Oversight Committee, took over. "Commander, you volunteered for this assignment when no other officer would. Why?" asked. "I had my reasons," replied simply. "That's not an answer. Were you ordered to volunteer, pressured by your superiors?" "No, I asked to be considered for the assignment." Paced in front of him. "You're a decorated war hero. You fought forces during the border conflicts. You saw your friends die in those battles, and yet you agreed to marry a princess. That doesn't make sense unless you had ulterior motives." Remained calm. "It makes perfect sense if you understand my real reason." "Then please enlighten us," said sarcastically. Took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. 5 years ago, I was on a solo reconnaissance mission near space. My ship took damage from a debris field. Life support failed. I should have died out there. The courtroom went silent, everyone leaning forward to hear better. "But a science vessel found me," continued. "They could have left me. Humans and were still enemies then. Instead, they brought me aboard and saved my life." His form suddenly blazed with recognition and shock. Her colors cycled through a dozen emotions in seconds. "The ship's commander was a young researcher," said, his eyes finding across the room. "She spent 3 weeks keeping me alive, adjusting her ship's environment so a human could survive. We couldn't really communicate. I didn't speak and she barely knew any human languages, but she taught me basic words. We used mathematics and simple gestures." His voice grew softer, filled with emotion. "She showed me her research, pointed out stars and nebulas, shared her food rations even though they did nothing for me. She played music for me. Music sounds like wind chimes and star songs. I listened to it every night. When my people finally rescued me, I tried to thank her. I tried to ask her name, but she just shook her head. I don't think she wanted me to know. Maybe she wasn't supposed to have saved me. Maybe it violated some protocol. I never found out." The courtroom was completely silent now. Every eye moved between End, whose form was trembling with barely controlled emotion. "I went back to my duties," said, "but I couldn't forget her. I started learning, thinking maybe someday I could find her and say thank you properly. I studied your culture, your history, your poetry. And when they asked for volunteers for this diplomatic marriage, I said yes because I never stopped hopping." "Hopping for what?" Arbitrator Thane asked gently. "Hopping I'd find her again," said simply. "And then I saw Princess for the first time through the diplomatic. She was reading in her quarters, and I recognized the way she moved, the way her colors shifted when she was concentrating. It was her. The woman who saved my life was the princess I was supposed to marry." Stood up abruptly, her form blazing so bright that several people shielded their eyes. She moved toward the center of the courtroom, traditional protocol forgotten. "Your ship was called the Wanderer," she said, her voice shaking. Human vessel, registered Earth Coalition, solo pilot. You were dying when we found you. My research team said we should report you and move on, but I couldn't. I couldn't let you die alone in the dark. Tears were streaming down his face now. You played music for me, every night. This beautiful, haunting sound that made me feel less alone. You drew pictures, said, moving closer. On the walls of your room, terrible pictures. Humans are not good at art, but you drew Earth your home and you looked so sad. I never knew your name, whispered. I never knew yours, replied. I checked the human databases after you left, but there was no record. Your rescue was classified. Military protocols, he said bitterly. They didn't want anyone knowing a ship had helped me. It might have complicated the peace negotiations. They stood facing each other in the middle of the tribunal chamber, the entire assembly watching this impossible reunion unfold. Arbitrator Thane cleared his throat. Princess, can you confirm Commander's account? You saved his life 5 years ago. Yes, she said, unable to look away from. I violated my research mission protocols. I risked my career, but I couldn't abandon him. Even though we were enemies, even though helping him could have been seen as treason, I couldn't let him die. And you, Commander, Thane said too. You learned an entire language and culture just to find her again. I learned it to say thank you, corrected. Finding her was a miracle I didn't dare hope for. The prosecutor looked shaken. This changes everything, she murmured. Attorney slumped in his seat. We thought it was politics. We thought it was strategy. You asked if love can exist between our species, said, addressing the entire tribunal now. You question whether this marriage was real or just political theater. I'll tell you what's real. 5 years ago, a woman chose to save a human man, even though it cost her career advancement and risked punishment. And that human man spent 5 years learning everything about her people just for the chance to say thank you. That's what's real. Stepped forward, closing the distance between them. The treaty, the politics, the peace between our peoples, those are wonderful things, but they grew from something much simpler. They grew from one act of compassion in the darkness of space. This marriage isn't just a political arrangement, continued. It's a choice. We choose each other every day. We chose each other before we even knew this marriage would happen. The judges conferred quietly among themselves. Finally, Arbitrator Thane spoke. This tribunal finds that the marriage between Princess and Commander is genuine and entered into freely by both parties. All charges of coercion are dismissed. The courtroom erupted in conversation, and barely heard it. They moved toward each other, his hand extending with the protective barrier, his energy form reaching out to meet it. I looked for you, she whispered. For months after you left, I searched databases, trying to find the human pilot who drew terrible pictures. I'm sorry I draw badly, he said with a watery laugh. I'm not, she said. Those terrible pictures made me realize something. Humans feel everything so deeply that you have to express it, even if you lack the skill. That depth of feeling is beautiful. They stood together in the center of the tribunal chamber, their hands almost touching, and the whole galaxy watched as two impossible people proved that love could bridge even the widest gaps between species. The opposition had tried to tear them apart. Instead, they had only made public the truth that would inspire countless others. Sometimes the strongest bonds are forged in the darkest places, between the most unlikely people. And sometimes, the universe gives you a second chance at saying thank you. 6 months after the tribunal, stood in the medical bay staring at the test results in disbelief. Doctor, the head of xenobiology research, looked equally shocked. I've run the tests 5 times, said, her hands shaking slightly as she held the data pad. The results are consistent. Princess, you're pregnant. That's impossible, whispered, her form flickering through a dozen colors in rapid succession. And humans can't reproduce. Our biology is completely different. You're energy-based, I'm matter-based. The science doesn't work. "The science says it doesn't work," corrected gently. "But apparently biology found a way." His mind raced. She thought about the past months with their growing closeness, the way they had learned to exist together despite their differences, the specially designed neutral zones where they could interact safely, the protective barriers that let them touch. Had something changed at the quantum level? Had their love somehow created a bridge that science said was impossible? "Is the child healthy?" she asked, placing what would be a protective hand over her energy core. "We don't know," admitted. "This has never happened before. The child seems to have characteristics of both your species, part energy, part matter. We're calling it a hybrid state. The pregnancy is progressing, but we need to monitor you very closely." Needed to tell. She found him in their quarters, working on reports from his latest diplomatic mission. He looked up when she entered, and his smile faded immediately when he saw her colors. "What's wrong?" he asked, standing up quickly. "Are you hurt?" "I'm pregnant," she said simply. Froze. For a long moment he just stared at her, processing the impossible statement. Then he laughed, a sound of pure joy mixed with disbelief. "How?" "The doctors don't know. They say it shouldn't be possible, but it's happening anyway." He moved to the neutral zone, reaching out to touch her energy field through the protective barrier. "A baby. We're having a baby." "Are you happy?" asked nervously. They had never discussed children, assuming it was impossible. "Happy?" Eyes were bright with tears. "I'm terrified and thrilled and amazed all at once. This is a miracle." The news spread quickly through both civilizations. Medical teams from Earth and Prime descended on the station, eager to study this unprecedented pregnancy. Some saw it as a scientific breakthrough. Others saw it as proof that the two species could truly become one people. The pregnancy was difficult. His body, designed to process pure energy, struggled to sustain a partially material being. Human medical technology helped stabilize her, while energy techniques provided the child with necessary quantum sustenance. It took teams from both species working together, making breakthroughs in bioenergetic medicine that would benefit both civilizations for generations. Elder, stripped of his council position after the tribunal, tried one last time to stop what he called this abomination. He petitioned the courts to declare the pregnancy illegal, a violation of natural law. The petition was rejected within hours and was banned from all government proceedings. Generals serving time in military prison heard about the pregnancy and reportedly laughed bitterly. "I tried to stop them," he told his cellmate. "But love is more stubborn than hate. I should have known." Admiral became a frequent visitor to N's quarters. The tough military commander who had once opposed the marriage now brought baby clothes she had knitted herself, carefully designed to work for either a solid or energy-based child. "I was wrong about you too," she admitted one evening, watching and prepare the nursery together. "I thought this marriage would weaken us, make us vulnerable." "And now?" asked. Smiled, something she rarely did. "Now I think vulnerability is just another word for trust, and trust is the strongest foundation any alliance can have." 9 months after that impossible moment when saw at their wedding altar, she gave birth to a daughter. The delivery was unlike anything the medical teams had ever witnessed. The child phased between solid matter and pure energy, existing in both states simultaneously. They named her, a name that worked in both Korean and languages. It meant lily in Korean and light in ancient. She was perfect in her impossibility, with dark eyes that could somehow see across the energy spectrum, and its ability to shift between physical and energetic states. Held his daughter carefully, using the same protective technology that let him touch. Cooed and flickered, her tiny form glowing softly. She was solid enough to hold but light enough to float. She was the first of her kind, a bridge between two species built from love rather than diplomacy. "She's beautiful," whispered, her form glowing with maternal warmth. "She's impossible," said with wonder, "just like her mother." 3 years passed. The space station that had hosted the controversial wedding became a symbol of unity between species. More humans and chose to marry, inspired by and story. Cultural exchange programs flourished. Joint scientific missions discovered wonders neither species could have found alone. The garden that and built together became famous. Half the space contained earth plants, roses, jasmine, bamboo. The other half held energy crystals that hummed with soft music. And in the center, where both environments met, strange hybrid plants grew. Flowers that bloomed with both petals and light. Trees that were partially solid wood and partially pure energy. Played in this garden daily, shifting between her forms as easily as other children ran and jumped. She could touch the roses without being pricked because she could phase through the thorns. She could dance with the energy crystals because part of her was made of the same quantum stuff. Other hybrid children joined her over the years. 40 more human marriages had produced children, each one unique, each one impossible, each one proof that love could create what science said was forbidden. Admiral visited on a sunny afternoon, or what passed for sunny on a space station. She found and sitting in their garden, watching play with another hybrid child named. "I have news," said, settling onto a bench that had been designed for human use. "The Coalition and the Empire are signing a full integration treaty. Open borders, shared technology, combined defense. It's happening." Colors shifted to pleased gold because of the marriage. "Because of what the marriage proved," corrected. "You two showed us that our differences don't have to divide us. That understanding is possible. That love, real, genuine love, can exist between beings who seem completely incompatible." Watched his daughter laugh as she shifted between solid and energy forms, playing a game that only hybrid children could play. "We didn't do it alone. So many people helped. The engineers who designed the protective barriers, the doctors who figured out how to sustain a hybrid pregnancy, the diplomats who kept working even when it seemed hopeless." "But you were the first," insisted. "You two walked down that aisle when everyone said it was a mistake. You froze, and instead of letting people drag you away, waited." He spoke words of patience and love. That moment changed everything. Thought back to that day, to the terror she had felt, to the impossible connection she had sensed when she looked into his eyes. "I was so scared," she admitted. "Fear is natural when facing the unknown," said wisely. "But you faced it anyway. That's not just brave, that's revolutionary." As the afternoon wore on, more families arrived at the garden. Human parents with spouses, hybrid children playing together, scientists discussing their latest discoveries, artists sharing work that blended both cultures. It was a community that shouldn't exist, built on a foundation of love that had once been opposed. Ran to her parents, her form solidifying as she crashed into his legs. He picked her up, laughing at her excited chatter about the game she had been playing. Wrapped her energy field around both of them, creating a family embrace that glowed softly. "Mama, Papa," said, using words from both languages. "Teacher says I'm special because I'm both. Is that good?" "Being both is wonderful," told her daughter gently. "You're not less because you're different, you're more. You carry the best of both worlds inside you," added, kissing the top of her head. "You're proof that love is stronger than biology, stronger than politics, stronger than fear." Considered this seriously, her young face scrunched in thought. Then she brightened. "Like you and Mama." "Exactly like me and Mama," confirmed, meeting eyes over their daughter's head. Later that evening, After was asleep in her specially designed bedroom that could accommodate her shifting forms, and stood together in the observation deck. Through the massive windows, they could see both Prime and Earth, distant points of light representing their home worlds. "Do you ever regret it?" asked quietly. "Giving up your military career, dealing with the opposition, all the difficulties we faced?" Turned to her, taking her hand through the protective barrier they still needed but hardly noticed anymore. 5 years ago, you saved my life when you didn't have to. You risked everything for a stranger. The least I could do was learn your language and try to say thank you." "And you got so much more than a thank you," said, her colors shifting to amused pink. "I got everything," corrected. I got a future I never imagined was possible. The universe gave me a second chance and I took it." "The wedding was opposed," said softly, remembering Elder General, all the people who had tried to stop them. "But they couldn't stop love," finished. "Love doesn't ask for permission, it just asks for courage." They stood together in the observation deck, two impossible people with an impossible child, having built an impossible life. Around them, the station hummed with activity, thousands of beings from both species living, working, and loving together. The opposition had been fierce, the obstacles had been real, and the challenges would continue. But every day woke up and chose. Every day he chose her back. And that choice, repeated across thousands of mornings, had changed the galaxy. Because in the end, the greatest human strength wasn't their technology or their fighting spirit. It was their stubborn, irrational, beautiful insistence that love matters more than logic. That connection transcends biology. That sometimes, the most revolutionary act is simply choosing to see someone else, really see them, and deciding they're worth everything. The princess had frozen when she saw him, paralyzed by the weight of an impossible moment. But she had found the courage to move forward, to choose love over fear, to build something new from two very different worlds. And the universe, vast and mysterious, had blessed that courage with a miracle named, and with countless others still to come. The wedding had been opposed, but love had won anyway. It always does.